Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello, my name's Lizzie Hobbs, and welcome to the Barbican, to the screening of Aftermath, which is huge behind me. I wanted to just give an introduction to the programme, to tell you why we made it. I made a film about Oskar Kokoschka, which I started in 2014, and it's finished in 2017. And it was about his relationship with Alma Mahler. And that relationship took place between 1912 and 15. So it sort of ended up being a film about his experience in the First World War. And then when I finished the 6-minute film, my producer Abigail and I thought, how do we show people, a 6-minute film? You can't kind of get people out and then show them a 6-minute film and then they go home again. So we had the idea that we would kind of marshal together a whole host of other animations that sort of related to the themes in the film. So that's what tonight is. It's 13 animations that we've curated sort of to go with my film about Kokoschka. And it's sort of, there's some sort of new films that have been just fresh from the festivals, and then some wonderful older classic films, including Vera's film Cannon Fodder from 1977, and Emma Calder's wonderful film The Queen's Monastery, and then lots of other films that kind of sort of fully immersive, First World War experiences. And it just managed to sort of come in at the end of the kind of centenary celebrations, which I'm really sort of happy to suddenly have found myself to be a part of. And then afterwards, Abigail, Maryam and Emma and I will be on the stage so we can answer questions about our films. Shelley Wayne and Vera Noba are also in the audience, so we can shout questions to them too, maybe. And I hope you enjoy the programme.
So I'm really delighted to be joined by Lizzie, who you've already met, who made the last film I'm OK, Emma Calder, who made The Queen's Monastery, and Maryam Mohajer, who made Red Dress, No Straps. So can we give them a round of applause? So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and I'll open it up. But I'm Abigail and I co-produced Lizzie's film at the end. So I was really interested with all three of your films that you all have a beautiful painterly style. And I sort of wanted to ask you if you could explain why you chose that medium for your films. And I mean, I know you are a painter, so I'm really interested in the way that you've chosen to create. I really love all the sort of the textures and the fabric printing. So could you maybe start and just talk a bit about your...
I used to be a painter before I became an animator, and I am sort of obsessed with the texture. I think it helps. I don't know. It gives it more of a sense, more of a feeling when you have texture rather than just a smooth surface. If that answers your question. I find textures more expressive. It took a while to work out how to do it. It took probably 2 months until I found the right technique to get the effect I got. But I got there at the end.
Well, my technique came out of a sort of dribbly series of experiments. So I'd been sort of just mucking around, cleaning out old paintbrushes, and after having worked on something that was quite controlled, I just wanted to throw paint around. And when I had the idea of, I'm not going to go into that in detail at the moment, but when I decided I was going to use it to make The Queen's Monastery, that kind of dribbly style, I realised that the complex narrative that I was trying to make wouldn't just work if I just kind of completely threw the paint at the paper. So I worked on a very sort of controlled series of animated drawings in pencil to start with, so that the whole thing was actually drawn first in pencil, apart from things like the explosions, which I just did freehand. But I also had a team of people. Jed is in the audience, who did a lot of animation, and quite a few other people helping. So it wouldn't have just worked by just completely throwing the paint at it all the way through. So it was a mixture of extreme control, but actually using the chance things that I'd created to sort of invent the style. So that was the plan.
So throwing paint at it.
Yes, same thing actually. Yeah. So I was using Kokoschka's drawings and his diaries and his prints, and then almost kind of busking on those themes of the work that he'd done, and then I was recording it on this kind of A5 size paper under the rostrum. And it's quite important for me that the paint is kind of wet when I record it, because I feel a bit like Maryam, that it gives a life to the work, you know, to see that it's kind of wet. And it's also then almost like recording the moment that I've made it or something. They're almost like dead to me once I've drawn them. I sort of pile them up on the floor and I don't really mind what happens to them. So it's very important that they're wet. They're about A5 in size, and they're based on these Kokoschka drawings and paintings and diaries and plays as well. And then I just kind of edit it, all together at the end. Something.
And then, and again, with all three of you, very strong soundtracks. And I think you're talking a bit about the archive there, but could you all maybe just talk a bit about how you came, because both of you, Emma and Lizzie, you're obviously using existing, quite powerful orchestrations, and then maybe if you talk a bit afterwards about how you work with your composer.
My composer is here, Tanura. It's not our first project together. I've been lucky to find her, really. I don't know if you've experienced it, but with collaborations, when you click, when you understand each other, I think you just shouldn't let the other person go. And it's happened. I mean, she understands me. It was a very positive experience, and she was great.
And at what point did the composition come into your piece? Were you working to the music, or did the music come in later?
I showed her the animatics. So when the storyboard was done, pretty much, I showed it to her, and then she went off to work on it. And then I would keep sending her different scenes, and then we spent one day together at her lovely studio, and that was it, really. I think she had to work towards my film more, yeah.
And I mean, I know the answer to this, but why is it called the Queen's Monastery, perhaps?
I have to keep it brief.
Do you want me to do it instead?
No, the whole film started off as there was a competition to make a film to a piece of classical music, and I basically went through hundreds of records and found this piece of music by Janacek, and I listened to the music. I came up with all the sort of key ideas: a monastery, staircases, monkeys. I had the idea for a passionate sort of love affair idea of sort of, a woman who loved two men. I had that idea anyway, but the sort of combination of the obsessive, daydreaming kind of love, and all the ideas, the visual ideas I heard when I listened to the soundtrack, and that was basically how it happened. I didn't actually get the money for that competition in the end. I got the money elsewhere, but it was quite an amazing experience, because after having sort of got the initial story written down, I then researched the composer. And I'd found that he'd actually written it as a commissioned piece at the end of the First World War in Brno Town Square in what had just become Czechoslovakia. And it was originally written to be performed with a group of acrobats, and he also was, all this sort of instrumentation and all the sort of kind of a lot of the scoring was done after going to Bruno's zoo, and he was listening to monkey sounds and things like that to actually inspire the instrumentation. So it seemed really magic that I'd actually been able to see so many things, and he'd been brought up himself in a monastery, and the title of the actual piece that I chose out of the whole Sinfonetta was The Queen's Monastery, but I hadn't realised that when I had thought of the monastery. So anyway, there you go.
It's a good story. And your music?
Yeah, the music's from Kokoschka's diaries, and it's a favourite piece of his. And he'd made all these kind of lithographs on the Orfeo and Eurydice myth, and so that, you know, it kind of slotted together, and I really loved it. So I just cut the pieces, the footage that I had to it, you know, to make this kind of little journey. And yeah, so it was quite nice to work with the music first. It's quite a different thing. I mean, most animators probably don't, but it was a nice experience. You know, it happens rarely, doesn't it?
Well, actually, we broke up the whole soundtrack. In fact, Jed did the bar chart, and it was incredibly difficult because there were 101 instruments in it, and I think it virtually drove him mad. But it's not just a matter of finding out where every instrument comes in. It's also a matter of, you know, deciding when's the best place to cut. So you don't necessarily, you know, I mean, obviously you can cut on drum beats, that's quite easy, but, you know, there's a lot of other interpretation that you need to go into. And it's often something now that people don't bother doing because it's so easy to do it the other way around. But I think actually if you can, you know, make a film to a piece of music, that's almost the best thing with animation.
Well, quite a lot of people do pop videos, don't they? I suppose music videos are the kind of obvious, but I suppose getting a narrative from it is
I'm not
harder.
sure people do bar charts in the way that we used to do them, though. You know, because often people just kind of just loose, like kind of so easy to kind of just cut. I mean, I do it myself because I get lazy too. But you know, you can just chop things together on After Effects and Premiere quite easily. And you know, I tried to do a bar chart the other day, and after about half an hour, I just couldn't be bothered, you know, because it's quite a lot easier than it used to be in the old days with film. When we were working on 35mm film, you know, you didn't want to waste footage, so you obviously meticulously broke down your soundtrack, and it was to save money, like, really.
So you mean putting it on paper, kind of like, I don't know what you mean by bar chart. You mean like putting
a bar chart is the musical equivalent of a dope sheet, okay. Basically where you have every frame on the sheet, and then every time you go boom, like that.
And you animate.
And then you write down where the cello comes in or where the drum beats are, and it's, you know, then you can synchronise completely to the sound. So.
Wow.
Any questions from the audience? Before we just talk about bar sheets all evening.
We can do that too.
Any hands? No?
Sorry. And congratulations. I thought it was a great collection of work. Really unglamorous view of all, which was fantastic. I suppose my question is more about the creative process and whether, before you start, why did you choose the topic you chose? And whether, as you went through the journey, whether it changed your view of what you were working on.
That's a good question, isn't it? Yeah. Maryam, do you want to go first? Yeah.
My story started with an object. I just thought about a sewing machine. It's a beautiful object as it is, I think. And also when it works, the rhythm, the movement is just so rich. And it started with that. Then I remembered my childhood. I did have a granny who made me dresses. And I did want a strapless dress that I never got.
There's still time.
Still time, yeah. She's not around there. But what happened with the film was it didn't start as a war film. The film was not supposed to end like this. The original ending was her just saying, I can't wear a strapless dress until my boobies grow bigger, and that would be the end. And just one night, random, out of the blue, we were coming back from a friend's house. And I just, in the car, I remember I was in tears, crying and telling my husband, I think she's going to die. So yeah, it's a very organic process. It changes. It's like, I don't know, it's like children. It could grow and change. Another thing that could, sorry, I just had to say it quickly. Another thing, it depends on your approach as the director. Another thing that could happen is with recording the voices for the animation, because there is no limit. You haven't even drawn your characters yet. You haven't created them yet. So you start with the voice. For example, the jewelry shop guy, he was not supposed to be like that. He was just this tiny man who would talk like this, very clean. The voice artist is here, actually. And we just experimented a bit, and this guy suddenly turned into this scary, borderline pedophile. So yeah, it's such a, like, it's a complete, like a life. It changes a lot. That's me done.
I suppose I initially the ideas were just throwing around the paint and the idea of the woman who was in love with two men or one man, that kind of storyline. But then obviously once I found the music and the context of the music and the relationship with war, it was the perfect thing to actually, rather than just tell a sort of story that was more personally based, it was actually getting to the bottom of why, we have conflict. And so the film was actually taking, all the ideas and the music and the extremities of emotion that go from just personal conflict with a woman and a man, and then, combining that with the idea of how war changes people beyond recognition. So it was putting the two things together. And, when you want to make a film about an idea, you want the audience to respond. And how do you get the audience to respond the most? It's working with extremities and, not always what, you might predictably expect. And, I suppose I don't know what, I'm beginning to forget what the question was, but obviously it started, did it change what?
Your opinion of war and the process of making it.
I don't think it maybe just changed, I don't think it changed my opinion on war particularly, but it might have changed my own sort of knowledge of what I was able to do myself by pushing my creativity to the limits, I suppose. That's going from some simple little blobs that were quite naive and rough to actually taking that style to try and convey a very difficult sort of film with quite complex emotional outcome. I suppose that's what it did.
Yeah, it was great to see it again. Yeah, I'm sure everybody enjoyed that, because Emma's film is very well known in the animation world, but it's not often you can kind of screen it in a
Well, thanks to the
context.
BFI who restored a lot of work this year, so that's why it's been able to be shown and stuff.
Yeah. I think I started with I was trying to make a film not about war, but there was a photograph. I don't know if anybody else knows about Kokoschka and Alma Mahler. I'm sure some people do. But the most famous thing about them is this enormous life-size doll that he had commissioned of her, and it's furry. It looks like a kind of polar bear with bosoms, and it's really sort of strange, yeah. And I thought, oh, wow, great, I'll make a film about that, and how brilliant, And then I started trying to think, oh, gosh, and then in the end he sort of beheaded it, and it was covered in red wine, and so it was really sort of a misogynistic kind of story. It was really hard to kind of convince anyone that it was, and there was actually no story there. He made the doll and then it was decapitated and put out for the rubbish. So that's how I sort of started, and then I was reading his diaries and I thought there's probably more to this relationship than the doll in the end. It was, he was young and foolish. We'll forget that. So just trying to sort of sort of think about that relationship from a different way, because it was really interesting, the sort of passion and things. And the war was sort of almost secondary.
He was more traumatised by love than by war.
Yeah. And she almost kind of ashamed him into going to the war. You know, he didn't actually particularly want to go, but she sort of, you know, you coward, you know. So there was a bit of that going on. And then he sold his very famous picture, Bride of the Wind, to buy this kind of old horse, this sort of nag, so that he could be he wasn't in the cavalry, so that he could have a horse and be in a certain regiment, so he could sort of gallop into the war with this romantic, leaving his lover behind. But he kept on thinking about her, but she'd moved on already. She had Gropius, and, you know, she moved on to other men. Yeah. So that's why, yeah. So it wasn't really, the journey kind of occurred while I was making the film. I was drawing, and so I didn't have a plan at all, and it sort of comes from the drawing for me. But it's not often that people do that. Most people have a plan. It's more advisable to have a plan, isn't it?
If there's nothing else you do, Lizzie, it's you stand in Q&As and say, don't do it like I do it. It's very good. Any other questions from the audience?
It'd be good to hear what people think about the programme in general, because we've shown it now 4 times, haven't we? But it's never looked as kind of beautiful, you know, thanks to NAG and LIAF, because this is a wonderful venue, and all of the files were the best, you know, so it really looks wonderful. So it's really nice to kind of see the whole lot like that. Was it a bit too much? It's quite intense.
Is everyone traumatised?
Yeah. No.
I asked that question as well. I think it's an obvious one. I think it ought. I mean, I know it's a bit of a.
LIAF was our preferred London venue.
I think we should do that next year.
Yeah. Okay.
We've got films to make now. We're very busy people.
We showed it to in the Leicester Expressionist Museum, and that was really wonderful, because the film It Would Piss Me Off to Die So Young is based on Otto Dick's prints, and it's so kind of like, and we were in the room with the prints and the Kokoschka prints and Kathy Kollwitz, and which is the silence film is kind of based on Kathy Kollwitz's woodcuts. So that was a really kind of amazing experience, because we were kind of surrounded, you know, by these artworks. And for me, that was one way of kind of putting the programme together, was to think about the art that was produced and the poetry that came from it, and how that sort of resonates now, you know. So that was pretty great. But yeah, this is the last aftermath screening. Yeah, we're done. We're done, aren't we?
Anyone else?
They're all thirsty now. They look thirsty.
All that fighting makes you thirsty.
Yeah. I think you should tell people about tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Was there something else you were supposed to plug earlier?
Oh, the catalogue at NAG, yeah.
Buy a catalogue.
There's a beautiful catalogue. It's only
Come
a
to
£5.
Female Figures tomorrow night, which is here at 6:30. And that is women animators making films about the sex and the body and sexuality. It's quite racy.
It's very racy. Abigail
fun.
did it last year. It's almost like totally sold out. Sweaty crowd.
I don't know about sweaty. I'm not making any
Q&A.
guarantees about sweaty crowds. But.
It's a lovely programme, though, isn't it? And Abigail's curated that. Yeah, she's great. It's not going to be like this. It's going to be different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we say a big thank you to NAG? Yeah, here he is. Yeah,
Thank
there's
you,
an
NAG.
amazing festival programme as well. There's loads more to do, isn't there, to go to? Yeah. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thanks to you, to Emma, to Mariam, and to Lizzie.